Now let's tackle succession and progression. This may be one of the hardest ones. Okay? What you're listening for when you're listening for a chord progression is that there's some kind of logic or connection or sense of one chord leading to the next. In other words, I play the first chord, the second chord, the third chord, the fourth chord, wherever I stop, it sounds like, oh yeah, I went through some kind of progression, or I went through some kind of a series of chords that have some kind of connection or direction someplace. Whereas a succession is just a bunch of chords I stuck together, and they don't necessarily have any real relationship to. They don't give you the sense of direction, and usually the direction is to the last chord or the last harmony. In other words, you hear this sense of moving to that, and that's a fun that's a characteristic of Western music, Western European music, from the Baroque period on, from the time of J.S. Bach on. Before that, the music had less sense of tonality, and that sense of tonality, or the sense of moving toward a goal, that final note being the tonic, or that final harmony being the tonic, is characteristic that's carried over into all kinds of popular music today. So, okay. Let's listen to a couple examples. This will be from the this is from the study materials first of all. So we're going to listen. We're going to hear three series of chords. They're separated by a few seconds of each, and you're going to hear that each of the subsequent series of chords gain in complexity. The number of pitches in each harmony are added. It gets a little more dissonant, in other words, but none of them really have a clear sense of progression. They don't go somewhere. So it's three different series. All of them are successions. Here's the second one. And you're gonna say, oh, those sound like, I might have heard that on a popular song. I mean, those are chords, those are familiar chords. None of them are really weird dissonant things, right? But the thing I think you hear different from this next example is, you have a sense when you get to the end of the series that it was logical, that it makes sense that you got there. You ever get left hanging. Things have a logical connection or progression. So let's listen to that. You hear that sense of like I got to a logical conclusion.
Yeah.
At the end, I heard.
Yeah, and then maybe the end where it really is clear.
Yeah,
And
you could hear like a few other notes, other chords in that came much faster in between compared to how the first one was just spaced out, just single chords.
yeah, although that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with progression versus succession. There's just some motion or different lines of music moving at different times. But did you hear that sense of that was sort of a, oh yeah, I felt like I ended. Okay. That one's really clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another one. And put that pause in there on purpose because it's like, well, I got to have that to make it sound right. Even though that's a lot more dissonant than some of the earlier progressions, dissonance doesn't keep it from having a sense of progression. You do that through that progression, or you end up with the dissonance. All right. So let's take a look at some plain test examples, or sorry, practice test examples, and see. Get some of these windows closed so I don't get confused which one I'm on. Now in these cases, I remind myself here. Chords. Okay, so you're going to hear two series of chords, and I'm going to stop us after the first one, and then stop us after the second one, so you can hear them without getting them confused together. All right, that's how I'd recommend you do it. So you have sort of a similar paradigm to what you had with consonance dissonance questions. The first chord is either a progression or a succession. The second chord series is either a succession or a progression. So your possible answers are succession, succession, progression, 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 succession, or succession, progression. And if you're not really sure about one of the two series, whether it's a progression or a succession, if you're sure about one of them, you've narrowed it down to two possibilities. Okay. Let's listen to that again. What do you think?
I think no, because it felt like it did, but then when it got to the end, it didn't feel like it ended.
Okay.
Sounds kind of like a succession.
I felt like it ended.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's kind of borderline. It's not really clear cut. I hear it as a succession, but I think it's in a little bit of a gray area. Let's listen to the second one.
That one sounded like it ended. That one sounded like progression.
It's
So
like,
does
yeah.
it matter where is it like where it's like the ending, or is it just throughout the whole thing?
If it doesn't have a really sense of clear progression to the end, then it's probably not a progression.
Okay.
Let's listen to that again. Sorry, I didn't get enough of it. Let me go back.
Succession, I think.
You play one more time.
Yeah. Let me do the two of them. That's okay.
That second one sounded like a progression.
Does it?
The second one did.
Yeah, see, the second one to me sounds like a succession because it doesn't really end for me. It's like it stops in the middle of maybe a progression. This is tough. This is not an easy one. Okay. What I would suggest to you is on these, if you feel like you're not sure, I would err on the side of saying succession, because it's probably going to be when you're really sure. Yes, that's clearly a progression when it actually is. Let's listen to this one. What do you think?
Progression.
Progression.
Yeah, you guys are sure. See, you're sure. Yeah, that's a progression. No question on that one. Okay, here's another one.
Succession.
Succession.
What do you think?
Maybe progression.
Yeah, that's a little tougher one. I hear that as a progression, but again, you guys are really hearing that clearly, the progression on the first one, so you can narrow it down. All right, let's do one more. My expectation is you're probably going to need multiple attempts to get some of these right, and that's okay. It's part of the journey. It's part of it is the journey is as important as the result, right? I want you to have listened and really struggled and thought, wow, what is a progression? But the hope is you have a better sense of what they are, what the meaning of the terms are, by having to struggle with it a little bit.
That's
Succession.
succession.
Yeah, you guys seem pretty confident of that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one just doesn't really end. It doesn't really go anywhere. Okay, here's the second one.
Play that one
Progression.
again.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go progression on that one.
Succession.
Yeah, that one's a little harder because it's dissonant, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's-
only, but that's a jazz progression. That's a progression. Yeah. Again, I think these are going to be tough. I don't think they're going to be easy, but hopefully with multiple opportunities, you're gonna hear some that are clear, and you're going to be able to narrow it down, and you'll be able to bludgeon your way if nothing else. Certainly on the practice tests to the answer you want. And I think you have enough opportunities, and the pool of questions is small enough on the unit test, the listening test too, that you should be able to do some bludgeoning. Okay?
I'm kind of going off the first